There we go. Welcome, everybody. I want to introduce Jennifer Mann, or was it Mann? Am I correcting? Am I saying that right?
Mann, yeah,
Oh,
Mann, yeah.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me and bringing awareness to the mind-body space. Without further ado, tell us, how did you get into this mind-body space? Tell us about your perfect storm, actually. What happened? What kind of symptoms were you running?
Hmm. So I always say that my journey started from when I was born, my journey of symptoms, but the perfect storm right before I crashed was made up of a baseline that had been running my whole life of perfectionism, high achieving, anxiety. Um, and then I went back to university after I had been a professional ballet dancer for my whole life, and I had a bunch of injuries, so I had to stop. So going back to university really heightened all of my coping patterns of perfectionism, high achieving, and I was working a lot. So I would not sleep for, I would say a few years. I was really sleeping maybe 5 or 6 hours a night, and I was working before uni, after uni. I had clients and patients and traveling. I was still doing some performance gigs at night. So it was a lot. But I would
Nice.
say that I probably wouldn't have crashed if it wasn't for those underlying patterns. And we can talk
Right.
all about that very shortly. But
Yeah.
basically, the symptoms were the main ones for me that had been following me and that got worse and worse were pain in between my shoulder blades, in my calves, in my hips. And then
Yeah.
sometimes when I was just a bit more tired or stressed or emotionally overwhelmed, it would encompass my whole body. And it would just be this throb and this sensation of sensitivity over my skin. And then another one was um, fevers that were completely unexplainable at the time. And they would last maybe a week. And I would have a low-grade fever of 37.5 Celsius. And then they would magically disappear. And for literally maybe 10 years, I thought I was the type of person that got fevers for no reason and when I was tired. And although part of that, there might be some truth in that in the sense that when I was overworked and tired, that's how my body coped. There's the understanding around that now is completely different. But
Yeah.
so fevers, um, and then accompanying my anxiety, I would get a tremor. So, when you're
Right.
really, really cold and you're outside
Yeah.
in the winter and you don't have a jacket and you've been walking, you've gotten out of the tube and you're walking. I was living in London, so that's what I'm remembering. Um, and it's like you're cold, but you're not. It's the anxiety. So there was this constant tremor that would come and go, a shaking in my muscles, eczema, psoriasis, these skin things that were coming, flaring up and going, flaring up and going. And then, of course, the gut, which is the heart
Right.
of the brain. And
Yeah.
my gut was these stomach aches that actually started when I was in ballet school when I was 12. And for years, I went to doctors for investigations, years. And what it
Oh,
consisted in is my whole abdomen, my bowel, the whole experience in my gut would just tense and squeeze. And the pain was so bad in some of these experiences that I would throw up. And I had
yeah.
this for many years, and it would happen in moments of acute stress, emotional overwhelm, physical fatigue, and they would last for maybe like 8 hours. Usually, I would sleep it off, and nothing would make it go away. So
Right.
that was like the symptoms that were coming and going, but the perfect storm was the university, the patterns, these symptoms that were coming and going. And we were moving house, my husband and I. And so, lots of stuff involved in moving house.
Yeah.
And then I was doing yoga on this one morning, and I actually have a video of it because I was filming myself and I hurt my back. And that was the beginning of my chronic fatigue journey. So I injured my back, a back spasm, and I remember it was weekend, and I said, I'm going to rest this weekend. It happened on purpose so that the universe knows that I need to work hard on Monday. So Saturday, Sunday, I remember I was like, I'm going to rest. And then towards Sunday afternoon, I started to get a fever again. And then the fever would stay for over a year and a half this time. And it did
Yeah.
not go away. I had a low-grade fever for a year and a half. And then in that year and a half, that was the whole severe chronic fatigue crash that we can talk about. But in hindsight, you know, the fevers were just a sign of that chronic fatigue that was coming, you know, expanding, contracting, coming and going. And that fibromyalgia pain pattern that was there probably from after my main injury in ballet. So a good 5 years before I crashed.
Was ballet, was it a lot of pressure doing ballet? Were you under a lot of pressure from parents and from your instructors and
Not my parents. So my parents divorced when I was 5. So
right?
dad was away, and for many years I wouldn't repair with him until later on in life. My mom was there, but I actually left home at 13 years old in a professional ballet academy, and there was a lot of pressure from the school, from the teachers, and it was all about you know, being perfect, not just how you move, how you dance, how you breathe, but also what you looked like and how you spoke. And a ballet dancer is an artist and there's a reputation. So even in the corridors, like you can't be slouching around and resting. Everything was just so high strung. And there's a lot of physical because of the working hours, but verbal and emotional abuse for many years. Yeah, from the
Yeah,
teachers.
that'll definitely fill up your bucket, right?
Yeah.
And keep your baseline at survival. And that
Yeah.
makes sense that you would have all these symptoms manifest. So that's no mystery. So that's, I like to with interviews, I like to go back to see where did your perfect storm, where did it come from? And usually it doesn't come from thin air. You can usually pinpoint where
Yeah.
it's from.
Yeah. It started when I was born. So
Yeah.
I was born into a house. My mom was a very just dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma
Yeah.
herself, and a lot of anxiety and a lot of control and anger repressed and then really expressed, and just like emotional waves. And my dad was the opposite: shut down, dissociate, numb, depression. And then my dad left, and that was really hard for my little 5-year-old self. I was really craving um, my dad. And yeah, so when he left, there was this big, a big void that this little
Yeah.
girl had to fill. And the only way that I felt safe in feeling like I was worthy, like I was enough, was in being the best at everything I ever did and high
Correct.
achieving and being perfect. So that was even before ballet. So and in my childhood, accompanying that, you know, a classical sign that your body is in survival mode, even as a child, is like illness. And I had chronic bronchitis, and then I had chronic ear infections, and then
Yeah.
I had to have my adenoids removed, and I had a surgery when I was 11. So all these things that were really strong, you know, signs that now it's clear, but back then, you know,
Right.
it's
We didn't
it's
know. We didn't know like some of the
no.
weird symptoms that were hard to explain. Like for me, it was, warts. I had warts, random itchiness in the eyelids, like just little weird things that didn't,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Um,
So many little things like that. Yeah, I think I can I used to get aside from like the eczema that would go from like white circle mushrooms on my face,
Yeah.
which I felt was very embarrassing for certain times. Even if I was young, I was still like, oh my gosh, why have I got these white things on my face? And then on my body,
Yeah.
blurry vision coming and going in the years. Yeah, I can relate to like symptoms that you investigate and then they're like, yeah, it's developmental, or we're not sure, or yeah, it's normal at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Most of them passed from what I remember.
yeah.
And it's just interesting now that we know, we can go back and go, wow,
Mm,
interesting. And you can connect the
mm,
dots. So that's,
yeah.
yeah. So what did you do for when you were dealing with all these symptoms? How did you
Mhm,
get into the mind body space? Did you first try out all the other things, waste a lot of
mhm,
money, go down the rabbit holes before you
mhm.
you found the mind body space?
Yeah. Well, so before I went back to university, in between getting injured and transitioning, I had started qualifying in yoga, Pilates, all these types of movement therapies like Feldenkrais, gyrotonics, and I was really studying. I was very curious because I was always injured, which is another symptom. And people around me doing the same amount of horrific hours and the same abuse as me, they were not getting injured. And I was like, why am I always
Yeah,
injured? So I was
yeah,
always curious, around the connection. It makes perfect sense. Your muscles, your tendons, your bones, everything is connected and responds to movement in your muscle through your nervous system, which pulls on tendon, which pulls on bone and ligament. And it's all directed by your brain and your nervous system. So if your nervous system is in a state of survival or hypervigilance, your muscles are not going to contract and relax as you want them to. They're going to have moments of, um, stress and high strungness, almost like a guitar that's out of tune because it's too high strung. So that's
yeah.
really what it felt like. And when I
It's a good way to put it. It's too high. That's a great way because that right away I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. So that's where I
yeah,
began to already be curious. So like I would say that the mind body space, although I was a dancer and interested, I was already like, something is connected here, but I went down the body route. I was like, what are we doing? Why does this person have this posture? And like, it's got to be more than just, because they sit at their desk all day. There's other stuff here. Look at their mood. What's happening? Why are they always so angry? So then I became, everything that has to do with functional movement therapy, from massage to PT. So that was the beginning of my curiosity. But I wasn't even ill there yet. I had my issues, but it wasn't like, oh, this is me. It was like, what's going on out here with all these other clients and patients? And then I went back to school to study biomedical sciences and physio. And when I was in physio school, that's when I really started to be like, wow. So it's so crazy how like the stars kind of aligned. But
yeah.
I got sick in my second year in physio school. And one of the last placements that I was on before I got ill was with fibromyalgia patients. And
Hmm.
I remember being in the clinic, and the clinical lead was saying, you know, they give you like this is the type of patient, and this is what we do, and okay, now I'm going to show you, you're going to shadow me, and then we're going to replace, and then you're going to lead. And I just remember watching her, and she'd been doing this for so many years, so it's almost like robot mode. You go in, hello, what are you feeling? All the questions, tick, 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 tick. And you only get 20 minutes with each patient. And these people are so desperate, so much pain. They come in and they can't
Yeah,
really move, the really severe fibromyalgia patients. And I didn't really know what it was at the time, other than what I'd learned in school and in physio school. You learn that pain is something obscure and misunderstood and not very clear. It's not structural when it's chronic, but it's also, there's no talk about the mind kind of thing, so it's
right.
still this big gray area. We don't know. There's pain clinics. And so one of the things I was noticing was that she kept assuming in her practice that the pain wasn't really there. It's like, no, keep going. No, let's do these TheraBand exercises. No,
Mhm.
no. And they would say, but it really hurts. And you could tell there was anxiety, depression, fear. It was just
Yep.
all over them. And I think that's what she was seeing. And she was like, well, clearly this person has issues. So I'm going to assume that that's the pain, that's kind of a stuckness that's happening and it's not real. So when I asked
Mhm.
her, what are the connections? Because clearly these people are in pain, but there's other stuff happening. She was like, oh no, it's just all made up. The pain is made up. So you just have to push through, tell them their exercises. They go home. They usually never do them, but that's how it goes. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, this is
Yeah.
crazy. And also, as I was looking at their pain patterns, of course, I was like, oh my gosh, I have some of these and I've had them for a few years. I think
Yeah.
I have fibromyalgia patterns. Um, and so then literally a few months later, that's when I completely crashed with CFS. So it's almost like
Yeah.
I learned just enough to
Mhm.
question what was happening. So then I got really sick and I didn't go there right away because it's really scary. I had fever, nausea, my lungs were aching, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk. I was like, what is going on? My so much brain fog. I had visual snow that developed
Yep.
really quickly. So, and it was really bad, really blurry vision. And then I was like, okay, this is a really bad flu. And then after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I was like, man, this is what is going on? So then all the investigations start.
Yep.
And then they usually, go, cancer and all the big severe diseases that might be happening. And then once those are ruled out, usually it's like autoimmune,
Right.
looking at all the things that might be, chronic, looking at the blood, and everything was clear there. And then they go viral, like viral. And they were like, oh, really high Epstein-Barr. And I was like, yeah, I had mono when I was 18. And they were like, this is it, you must clear the viral load. This is what's causing.
Mhm.
And so I went down that rabbit hole first, and I found this
Yeah.
medication in Switzerland that like clears your viral load or whatever. And I was taking antibiotics and painkillers. And so my body was like on top of everything it was
Yeah.
experiencing, having to flush through all of this substance that is, not native to the body. So that was very overwhelming. I could feel myself just getting worse and worse and worse. Um, then I went into, the physio route, pacing and chronic fatigue, like ME clinic, pain clinic kind of way. But
Mhm.
on the third week of a pacing trial, I got so sick and I had such a bad crash. And pacing, there are people who find healing and recovering on pacing. It's not because they're training their muscles to get used to exercise again, or their mitochondria is like slowly working
For
their
any,
way.
could you explain what pacing is for anybody that might not
Yeah.
know?
Pacing is when you incrementally increase both your activities of daily living
Yeah.
and your exercise and mobility. So if you're bedbound, you would start by going to the bathroom every morning, then you go back to bed. Then you go to the bathroom and brush your teeth, and you go back to bed. And then you increment, and then okay, today I'm going to stand and sit down from my bed 10 times. Tomorrow I'll do 15 times. And it's not that I did the pacing too quickly or too wrong. It's the whole principle. It's not
Mhm.
when it works, it's because the person is starting to feel safe
Mhm.
within that incremental activity, not because their muscles are getting stronger or
Right.
because you're training your body
It's the
and you
program.
might have. Yeah.
Amazing.
So but I didn't know that when I was pacing. So I was like, well, this isn't working. I'm not exercising. And this is sending me right back to
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah.
Um, so then all of the holistic functional medicine, gosh, so many tests, all of the pie charts. And I actually asked my husband if he wanted to do one as well, because
Mhm.
I was really curious because the practitioner in London was so convinced that it was all about the mold and the
Oh,
viral load that was in my blood. And I was like, I just don't know if this is like I just don't know, like I
yeah.
wasn't living in a black hole. So I just don't think this is it. So I asked my husband if he could do the test as well. And she was like,
Mhm.
yeah, sure, okay. And all of his values were worse than mine. He had such a higher load of Epstein-Barr, which is super fascinating because he does not remember ever having mono or anything like that, which is common. A lot of people have it asymptomatically.
Yep.
But anyway, higher mold. And the craziest thing was with the gut investigation, which is what informs the diet and functional medicine, which informs which supplements are going to heal you. I
Right.
had a not so much dysbiosis, meaning that there was a good balance in my gut, a lot of green and yellow and just a little bit of red. And my husband's was like 85% red. She was like, wow, what symptoms does your husband have? How sick is
Yeah.
he? And I was like, my husband's fine. He's like, he's doesn't have any symptoms. Um I just wanted to see the difference because I didn't think that these things are the root cause. And you know what she said? She was amazing. And she said, you know what, this is interesting to me as well, because I've never done a test on someone who doesn't have symptoms, because only
Uh,
sick people come to me. And so I think it was a learning curve for her as well, in how strongly certain indicators are like, that's the root cause of everything. So that was really cool and fascinating. And then osteopathy, the parent technique, which is this lymphatic drainage, massage,
mhm.
shiatsu, acupuncture, meditation, started going really spiritual here before recovering, but then I found it again. But really into qigong, but just from my bed still, a lot of yeah, very like spiritual meditation and connecting to like what's happening here, like something outside of myself needs to inform some of this because I don't understand like what is happening. So there was like
Well,
this need to step
while you're
outside.
going through these symptoms, were you feeling
Mm.
depression, lost, scared? Did you have anxiety? Did you have all the mental things that go with the journey usually?
I had a lot, yeah, the anxiety was still there. Yeah, it was
Yep.
the state in my nervous system was very dysregulated. I was super anxious the whole time. And that was
Yep.
that fear cycle that kept the symptoms on. And I wouldn't say depression. I think I was super anxious, stuck on high, like hyper vigilant. Um, and and then really, really, really angry. I was,
Yeah.
in that same fight
Yeah.
or flight. It was like anxiety, anger, like what the hell? Like, and then when
Right.
doctors were telling me, we really think that, there were multiple doctors who told me that I would never recover fully, multiple. Um, and one was a neurologist, and she was just so direct about it too. She was just like, looked me in the eye and was like, she was German lady. She was a German lady, and she said, with the symptoms you have and how healthy you were before, and like your level of activity before and now, and how quickly it happened, and nothing is showing up on the test. We see this all the time. I don't think you're ever going to fully recover in your life, and you need to accept it. You need to accept this new disability. And she said, you can forget about becoming a physio, you can forget about having kids. And I was just like, wow, like this is crazy. So
It's
that was
crazy how
really
much power.
hard to hear
It's
that.
crazy how much power some of these people have. Even some of these Facebook groups, or if you believe in it, they have a lot of power over you because your brain latches on, and that can crush you.
Yeah, absolutely. So much. And I really felt, I remember when I left her office, I felt like I'd been I felt like I'd been used. Like I was like,
Yeah.
she got so much money out of me. She gave me nothing. Like she didn't give me any concrete answers or any. I was like, I just felt completely used. Like she took so much of my money for 45
Yeah.
minute consultation and gave me such a huge diagnosis slash poor prognosis. I was like,
Wow.
I felt really like really used, I would say, and also abused by the situation. So yeah, there were some really hard moments, but the underlying state was always anxiety, and it was really followed by this buzz, this like
Mm.
zzz,
Yeah. You
electricity.
hear a lot about that. A lot of people talk about the
Mhm.
buzzing.
Yeah, just underneath the skin. And I could feel
Hmm.
it calm down when I would do these deep, deep breathing exercises or deep meditations, which now I know just dissociate you from your body even more and disconnect you from the experience that you need to actually
Yeah.
go into to help yourself heal. But at the time, it was the only way that I could interrupt what I was feeling. I just didn't know that brain retraining existed. And in those moments of deep meditation, that's when I heard the buzz because I would hear it go from here to like down here, it goes, and that was very insightful. I would say like, wow, when I bring whatever I wherever I always am down, something
Mm.
changes. That was information for me. I was like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Like downloads, like you were tapping in.
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And then so the short story of the long of it that I've already shared is that nothing worked.
Right.
Um, Truly, for me personally, nothing worked. I also did keto, paleo. I started eating meat again, which actually did feel good, but more like overall, like, ooh, this feels right, but it didn't make me any better. It was just like, I think eating meat and fish is the right thing, but it didn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
Until, and just for anyone listening, if you're trying so many different things and you've been trying it for more than 2, 3, 4 weeks, it's usually not the right thing for you because
Yeah.
when you do the right thing, it only takes a few days to interrupt the pattern because it's just a brain and body conversation. And when you
Yeah.
hear it for the first time and you interrupt it, your symptoms go and it's
Right.
amazing.
So how did the universe show you
Yeah.
brain retraining? What was that day like when you found it?
Yeah. I was had just enough energy to Google and I was on Google a lot, but then I could only really do it for like 10 minutes at a time because I would just it would feel so my husband would I was like, can you check this? Can you check this? And then it would overwhelm me and I'd be like, okay, never mind, let's just stop. But this one day, and it's not like I hadn't Googled it for any other day forever, but this one day, I think it was probably just a new video. I was like, full recovery from chronic fatigue, from being bedbound. I just like listed out what I was feeling. And I was like, full recovery, story, testimonial. And I came across a video of a girl called Sarah.
Hmm.
Um, and I watched the video. It was a short video. I think it was like 5 or 10 minutes. And she was saying how she did this thing, and which I'll share now. And on day
Hmm.
one, for being bedbound, she was kind of walking. On day two, she went outside for a longer walk. On day three, she was jumping up and down in her trampoline in the garden. And I was like, right, someone paid her to
Yeah.
say this. Like, what is this?
Yeah, that's
What
really
is
quick.
yeah. So I sent her a message. I found her on Instagram and I was like, hi, you know, this is my experience. I read that yours was practically identical. Can you share, is the video you made, like, is it legit? I just, without trying to be, I'm just like, I'm so desperate. I didn't want to come across as offensive, but I was like, is it real? And she said, yeah, every word of it was my true experience. And although after that, I still had some setbacks, that was the beginning of my full recovery. And it was The Lightning Process by Phil Parker.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. That's the one that all these other programs usually steal from or copy that I notice.
Yeah. Yeah. He's amazing. He's amazing.
That's
And
awesome.
Phil created this amazing brain retraining, and which isn't even called brain retraining. It's
Right.
like people have named it after the fact. It's he goes about it in the more classical, like mind body connection and
Mhm.
interrupting that, what's happening in your mind body connection. And I'd actually started, so from the moment when I found Sarah to when I actually did the LP, it was a couple of months because I still was like, I just don't know. This is
Right.
and the website was a little funny. It had clouds on it. I was like, this is a cult. Like, I don't believe this. It didn't
Yeah.
seem very scientific. I was like, this gives me like Scientology vibes. I'm not sure if I can
Yeah,
go
it's a little
through.
too woo woo. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you.
So I waited, and instead I started a program at the Optimum Health Clinic in London, which maybe you've heard of. Um, and they also do brain retraining, and I did it for 2 months with no results at all. And I
Right.
had a practitioner, and they did the kind of the same thing. Like, actually, the brain retraining there was very similar to the LP. It's just the approach was different, the intensity was different, and the
Yeah.
cleverness of what you're actually interrupting and the persistence, the understanding of what you have to do was also different.
Yeah.
Um, so when that wasn't working after 2 months, I was like, okay, I guess I'll do the LP. And it was phenomenal. It was amazing. I loved it so much. And I had a very similar experience to Sarah, where on the third
Yeah.
day I went for a bike ride, and it was like a 2 kilometer bike ride. It wasn't like I got on my bike and then off again. Like, I actually went for a bike ride. I was crying, I was laughing, I was like, oh my God, I'm hallucinating. This is insane. And and then I got home and I felt the fear, but I had this tool now that I could lean on. So no
Yeah.
matter what I was like, I just completely understood the what it was doing in, for the brain and the body. And it wasn't quite framed as the nervous system. I think that
Right.
term has come in later on, but it was just so fantastic and with my previous knowledge and understanding of the body and the mind, I was like, this makes perfect sense. And I think there's
Yeah.
also a big part of you that needs to believe that what you're doing is going to help. So there's almost like
Yeah.
a placebo as well that changes the state that you're in. And just helps you stay on track. And so after that, I thought I was completely recovered because I felt so good for a few days. But then I had a setback and I was a bit ill again. So that's when I found polyvagal work, somatic work, somatosensory, kind of going down like the neurorehab pathway, which is basically just stimulating skin, muscle, parts of the body, which in, Eastern medicine, they go down the route in like Chinese medicine, Qigong, the meridians, but really it's just sending brain messages to your brain that make your brain reorganize itself so that when you're having a thought or a feeling or an experience that's triggering, while you're sending these new signals through these neuroreceptors in your skin, in your muscles, in your tendons, through movement, through tapping, through shouting, vagus nerve, your brain is like, what's this shiny object? Okay, organizing, and it's like receiving information, reorganizing, and it really helps you stay on track with the interruption and the rewiring of the state of the story, of the inner critic, of whatever your experience in your mind is. And then the final piece for me, because I still would get a phone call from my mom or a text from my dad. I remember this one day I ran into a colleague that I hadn't seen in a long time. And she saw me and I was caught very off guard. And she was like, Oh, so I heard that you've been sick for a couple of years. Yeah, that's too bad. Well, I've actually gone on and I've finished my master's and I'm doing a PhD. And all of a sudden I felt my not enoughness come up and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been sick. Like
Right.
I'm nothing. I'm so worthless right now. And this person is just feeling sorry for me, telling me she's done a PhD and I had to drop out of uni. Like, oh my, and then I crashed again. So I was like, okay, I have all these tools, but there's something missing. And it was the
Right.
origin of the pattern. So you can interrupt the patterns a million times a day, but if you don't change their origin, it's like the root, the plant is going
Mm.
to keep growing. You need to change what is coming out of the ground. And so those
Right.
unresolved wounds through somatic experiencing, inner child work, and some deeper um, somatic work that really changed that core wound. Yeah, and then that's when I really, over time, became completely symptom free, probably for the first time in my life. Yeah.
Did you ever have any food sensitivities to go with that?
When I was younger, I was very sensitive to like lactose. So in the beginning, they thought that maybe the tummy aches were because of milk and yogurt and this and that and cheese. But it wasn't that, but that was the link. So there was a sensitivity around milk. They also thought my eczema was being caused by that. So I cut it out a few times and brought it back in. But my
Yeah,
body actually loves milk and cheese and lactose and and it does really
that's
well
amazing.
on it. So yeah.
Did you be? I noticed that you were always spiritual, but did you notice that going through this journey and doing the methods
Mhm.
that you found that worked for you,
Yeah.
did it force you at all to become to go deeper with your spirituality at all?
Yeah, it did 100% to I think to go beyond, I have a very strong, I'm a very curious person. And with
Yeah,
curiosity comes a lot of questions, a little bit like a scientist. So the scientist is always asking, like, but why? But how? Where's this coming from? And so there's a big part of me that always wants to explain things and understand. But when I went through this journey, there was a really deep and intuitive need for every part of me to reach out because I am a very intuitive person. It's just my mind is always questioning the
right,
intuition.
right,
And when I was sick and then afterwards, when I healed, I was like really feeling the need to connect, as I said earlier, even more to the universe, to all that is outside of myself, the forces that make things happen with ease for me. So that's, I really
right.
leaned into human design and gene keys, and just in general, just my, a little bit of astrology, and just like the intuition of like, I know this. I don't need to explain why I know it. I just know it and I feel it and I receive this information, and just learning that that's okay too. And I don't need to look for answers. I think that was, but yes, I absolutely feel that that was a big part of like, and it still is, like, I'm still a student. I still know nothing about anything. You know, there's so much to learn. But
Yeah, for me,
yeah,
what I noticed is the more I healed physically,
yeah.
the more I was opening up the gate and I was
Mm,
flowing more, right? It was like an
mm,
awakening. I never had that before. I thought I was a spiritual person, but I really, I was
yeah.
limited because of the physical. It was like blocking a lot, right?
I love that. Yes, I love that. And actually, that reminds me, my expression was always through dance. When I was a kid, because of my anxiety, I had a stutter from when I was about 8 to like 12. It was so bad. I couldn't read out loud. I couldn't speak so much. if I had to raise my hand at school, even if I was a straight A kid, I knew the answer so bad, but I was so afraid to speak out loud because I knew that like I couldn't get a word out without it stuttering. So
Yeah.
that whole experience, you know, I just connected so much with dance and moving, and it became my main form of expression. Like, movement is how I could feel, how I could think better, how I could speak my truth in many ways. So when I got sick, that was taken away from me. I was like, I can't move. What now? This is how I process. So that mentally, that was really hard as well, because movement for me was like medicine and how I
Right.
processed emotion. And it was in many ways what saved me, I think, from getting sick sooner. But then because of my injuries, I had to stop dancing. So that's when I think my mind like had less of an outlet because it didn't have any tools like I have now. But yeah, I love what you said, because that I really felt that when my body was taken away, I was like, I had to learn to just feel
Yeah.
into the field, into my energy and into the energy that's all around. Yeah.
Right. Did you ever, for me, what I noticed is all the things that I learned during the journey of recovery, right? I
Hmm.
finally recovered. But the things that I learned with my physical self, they
Mm.
translated a lot to the spiritual realm and also in the rest of my life with relationships. Like I use the same methods that I healed for
Mm.
relationships, for business, other things in life. A certain thing falls into my lap that I don't prefer, something that I don't like. I'm able
Mm.
to, in a way, change like the energy of it with the methods that I learned and kind of have it work in my favor. It's like you're almost
Yeah.
manipulating energy. Do you ever find that?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I really do. And it's when you it's almost like when you just like lean back a little bit and there's
Yeah.
a support that support is that energy that's working for us, and we're so used to just being in the front seat the whole time and having to be in
Yeah.
control. But when we lean back, it's like exactly what you said. Yeah, I really relate to that. Beautiful.
If you were to go back in time, either if
Mhm.
you were to give yourself advice or somebody that's listening that's just getting into this
Mhm.
mind body space, they're finding this video and they're like, okay,
Mhm.
all right, so here's my answer. What advice would you give to that person? Like some
Mhm.
tips, maybe one or two. For me, it'd be like, stick to it. Trust me, you'll get there. Do the work. Is there anything that you would tell them? Any advice?
Mhm. I think I want whoever's listening to feel like not just inspired, which all of your videos transpire that inspiration, but like the inner knowing, if I can pass that on, like whoever's listening, you and I are not too different. We're both human and we're the same enough. I have a nervous system. I have a
Yes.
brain. I have a body. I have a mind. And although I might have a different life, I might have different thoughts, I might have different genes, we are engineered, you and I, to work in the same exact way. And so if I could heal myself out of literally being sick and stuck from like when I was born, pretty much, from my stutter, if I think about like my stutter, and I actually missed out a really big symptom. I don't know how I missed it out, but it's my heart. I had a
Oh,
lot of ectopic third heartbeats and irregular heartbeats very often. When I was sick, it was really bad. Arrhythmias, POTS. And if I can heal that, if I can go from being completely bedbound to doctors telling me, they might have told you that healing is going to be hard, recovery might not even be possible. If I can do it, there's so many other people who have done it too, so can you. And I really, really say this, not because, again, not just because I want to inspire you, but it's just like, I hope it's a penny drop moment that we're literally that similar in nature that if I can do it, so can you. So, yeah, that's what I want to
It's amazing. I
pass
love that.
on.
That's huge because when people go through this myself, I thought I was a special person that I couldn't recover,
Mm,
that my case was different, right?
I
So that's
know.
really important for people to
I
hear.
know. Yeah.
One more thing. Normally I would cut this interview at that, but you know what?
Mm,
I wondered after
mm.
you recovered, right? What was what were the people's reaction that were around you? Were they doctors and family? Were they like, wow, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. So family, I think there was work there. There was an acceptance on my end because a lot of family was like, did she make this up the whole time? Was she never really sick?
Yes,
She was depressed for a year and a half, or that's why she could.
right.
And so part of my work was to realize that I can't do anything about what other people feel or think. I can only change the experience that I'm having. I can only choose my experience. So I choose to accept that you see me in the light that you've chosen, and that is your journey. And I just need to accept it in order to move forward. So that was hard because of those
Yeah,
reasons. And then I actually called, so I had a mentor at uni who has many PhDs in neurology, neuroscience. He's a fantastic head of physiotherapy of my university. And when I got sick, he told me, like, I don't know if you can come back, Jen, because there's a really poor prognosis for what you're having. And like,
yeah,
um, we usually see people who have this, they never come back. And so when I fully recovered, I went back to him and I was like, hi, I'm back. And then I was like, what do you think? So here's how I recovered. And I'd like to do this work now. And I'd like to go out and heal people and help them too. But a lot of the lectures that you taught me are wrong. How do you feel about that? And I literally listed so many things that I was like, when you talked about pain, when you talked about fatigue, you never mentioned the brain, you never mentioned the nervous system. So what do you think about that? Like, I'm literally asking you. And he said, and I explained the whole kind of my approach to what I learned and what I teach now, which is a nervous system centered approach. And I explained in the best possible way. And this was like for 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And he said, I'd like to believe it, but in order to prove it to me, what I would need is for you to finish your degree, get a master's, and do a PhD on it, because I find it really hard to believe what you're telling me. So when he told me that, it was another work of acceptance of like, wow, this guy who's so smart has so many PhDs and postdocs and studied so much on this, cannot see that the brain and the nervous system are connected with fatigue, with these kind of chronic illnesses. So it was a lot for me to hear, but that work of acceptance was there as well. It was like, you know what? That's your life, your experience. And the only way I can move forward is to literally just keep walking and do my thing and know in my heart and my brain and my experience that this is the most powerful work. And yeah, so that's kind of the experience that I had in those areas.
I
Yeah.
think th- you see that everywhere. You know, a lot of these doctors, experts, not all of them, there's some of them that are
Mm.
open-minded to it and they're venturing into this kind of
Mm.
work, but you see that there's a lot of resistance. People are calling it woo-woo, right? They're like, oh, that's
Mm.
just hippie shit. Don't give me that. Like, that's nonsense, right? And they keep going down the rabbit
Yeah.
holes. They create their own reality. But I
Mm.
think, you know, in a way, it's our purpose to bring awareness to this because proof is in the pudding. And the more we
Yeah.
bring awareness to this, the more we're doing the work. I think it's our
Yeah.
purpose that it's been
Yeah.
falling in our laps, and we're doing
Mm.
great work, very important work to help people.
Mm. Yeah.
So that
Mission
power,
completely. And in that
yes,
moment,
submission,
yeah, when he and I asked him like, but how do I help? And he said, you can go out there and help people now, and good luck with that. Or you can go down this whole path and probably never be heard or seen because you're a female and you're working in a space where at the round table there's a lot of old white men.
right?
So it
Egos,
might take a few centuries for the work to go
right?
in, and you might be dead before your work is heard anyway. And he actually said this to me. Um,
Wow.
yeah, which was really actually funny,
Have
and
you?
I
Do you
respect
think
him
he's
for
seen
that.
how far you've come now? How much of a presence you have? Has he? Do you think he's seen that?
Do you know what? I sent him an email with my manuscript of the book that I wrote, and I was like, it's not self-published, it's HarperCollins, it's recognized. These trauma therapists have read this book and said this, and this doctor read that, and he never replied. So
Yeah,
I think that whenever you're in academia, which is so needed and amazing in all the areas of life, but when you go into academia and you focus and you focus and you focus, I do think that over time you lose the bigger picture and you stop asking the connection of things, those important questions of like, okay, I know this thing about this one neuron that's doing this one thing,
right.
but then I don't ask how that connects to the whole body because nothing in the body works alone. So I think that is maybe an aspect of academia and research that is at
Right.
a disadvantage for
Well, with
those.
us, when you regulate the nervous system, a lot of these little details are irrelevant. They just fix
Mhm.
themselves. So we don't
Mhm.
have to, start digging. What for? But these people are
Exactly.
they're doing it the opposite. They dig first, but they don't see the big picture, so they get lost in the digging.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. And what
Uh,
is
amazing.
this beautiful your background? Is there a
Mountains. I love
story?
mountains. I love lakes. I
Mm,
love nature, and I want to have it in my
amazing.
backdrop.
I love that. I actually, one of my visualizations was a cold lake because my body was always hot, right? So I had the
Yeah.
fever. So it was this cold, not chill, but like a cold, cool lake. And I was lying in this visualization. I'm lying on a lilo. My toes are just hanging off, my feet are hanging off the lilo. My fingers are in the water, and there's mountains just like that and trees. So as you were talking, I could see it, and I was like, that kind of reminds me. And then when you moved, I saw the lake, and I was like, that's like my visualization. I had two core ones, and one of them
Yeah.
was literally that.
That was my favorite topic for
Beautiful.
visualizations was
Mm,
one day living near the mountains, either in
mm,
BC or anywhere there's mountains and lakes. I live in an
yeah.
area that doesn't have that, but that's my dream to live there and have a place,
Mm,
big property. It can be a small house I'm okay with. I just want big
yeah.
property where I can be free, walk with the dogs, and just be in tune with nature. And
Amazing. I love
that's my
that.
dream.
I love
Yeah.
that. That's amazing. Mm.
Well, thank you for joining me. This was a powerful, epic interview. I loved it. Thank you for everything you do and everything that you've shared with us. Um,
Thank you. Thanks for
and
having
please
me.
send me all your links and so I can put them in the description so people can,
Yeah.
um, join you on all the social media stuff.
Amazing. Um, I also wanted to offer any of your listeners who may experience chronic symptoms. We've never done this before on a podcast, but I had a listen before our interview to a lot of, just the conversations that you have. And I feel like your community would find a lot of value. So I'd like to offer a 50% off of the HEAL program, which is kind of encompasses a roadmap and everything you need to heal yourself from all the symptoms that we talked about. And yeah, yeah,
So, thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's see here. I'm just gonna stop recording.